Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the state of mobile in convenience and fuel. My name is Linda Toth, and I'm Managing Director for Conexxus. I'll be your host and moderator today. Today we have a full agenda. I'm going to start off with a few housekeeping notes. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Conexxus. I'm going to introduce our main presenter today. He'll do his presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. As far as housekeeping goes, this webinar is being recorded and it'll be made available for playback on Conexxus365.org. We ask that you're all on mute, but we ask that you ask your questions in the GoToWebinar interface panel. You'll see a block for questions. I encourage you to get those questions in early. You don't have to wait until the very end. If we have a lot of questions and are running out of time, the sooner you get those questions in, the more likely they'll get answered. We would ask that you have no vendor-specific questions today. Feel free to reach out to Don after the fact or other vendors of your choosing, but we ask that you refrain from asking those today. Some of our webinars are eligible for PCI requirements for continuing education. If you need a certificate for that, please reach out to us at 365@conexxus.org. Next. So this is our legal disclaimer that our attorneys make us put in. Essentially, Conexxus does not endorse any products or services mentioned here today, and the views and opinions expressed in the presentation are strictly those of our speaker and not necessarily Conexxus. So I want to give a big shout out to our 2022 annual Diamond sponsors. These folks go above and beyond in giving us sponsorship money, which allows us to do other things at our annual conference, bring you great events, and just further our mission to bring standards to the convenience and fuel retail industry. Next. So Conexxus, we are independent and nonprofit. We are independent from NACS. We work very closely with NACS, but a membership in NACS does not equal a membership in Conexxus and vice versa. Conexxus really does three things: knowledge, connections, and advocacy. Knowledge, we do like webinars like we're doing today. We do provide a lot of connections and networking opportunities. And then in terms of knowledge and advocacy, we participate in a lot of outside organizations that are setting standards or policies. And we're at the table just to make sure that your businesses aren't negatively impacted, and that if there are standards out there being developed, we can leverage those for our industry. We do also set standards for data exchange, security, mobile commerce, all sorts of things. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So overall, if you want to learn more about Conexxus, email us at info@conexxus.org. Finally, I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn. If you go to the next slide for me, Don. There is a LinkedIn group, Conexxus.org, which I encourage you to follow. By participating in that group, you'll see news and events and stories that Conexxus thinks are of interest. And if you'd like to learn more about Conexxus, as I said, you can email us at info@conexxus.org. If you have any questions about Conexxus 365, you can email us at 365@conexxus.org. So I'd like to move at this point in time right into our main presentation. And I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Don Frieden, who is the founder, president, and CEO of P97 Networks. And P97 Networks is an industry leader for mobile payments, applications, connected commerce platform, et cetera, for our industries. Don is also the vice chair for Conexxus Mobile Group, and he's been participating with that group and helping to lead that group since its inception. So I know I really appreciate his industry experience and leadership in that group. It's a great benefit. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Don.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. And it's an honor to be here today. It's also an honor to work with Conexxus as we drive for industry standards that allow all of us to move faster and bring more innovation to the marketplace. So it's very much a collaborative effort, and proud to be part of the organization. So today, the overview for today's presentation is I'll tell a little bit about who is P97 and why we're talking about the state of mobile in the convenience and fuels marketing industry. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the macro trends that are impacting our industry and our shoppers. I'll share some of the current mobile trends in our industry, talking about things like transactions, gallons, and inside baskets. and then talk about future opportunities for mobile. And then, of course, as Linda mentioned, we'll have a Q&A session. So we'll jump into it real quick. So P97, as Linda mentioned, is one of the leading mobile commerce platforms in the U.S. convenience and fuels marketing industry. We have over 66,000 retail sites connected to the platform, which gives us about a 56% penetration in the United States. Currently, daily volumes in mobiles, somewhere a little bit north of about 2.3 million. And we're very fortunate to have, these major oil brands or energy brands, as well as, top marketers. This is a sample of some of the customers that are on the platform. So we're, very honored to have these clients leveraging our technology. And so, what does P97 do, and how do we make mobile commerce easy for retailers and for their partners? So if you'll notice on the top left, we think about retail brands, and then we think about to enable mobile commerce. So this is to enable, card acquirers, digital wallets, marketing and loyalty hosts and super apps, fleets, auto OEMs, consumer packaged brands. Historically, a large retail brand had to go out and establish partnerships, contractual agreements, and relationships with all these different entities. But by bringing it together on a mobility services platform, it allows these brands to connect one time to our platform. And then, since we have all the integrations to these other mobile commerce partners, it really provides the two-sided network effects, where it's easier for the brands to get connected to all of those different and relevant partners, but it also allows those partners to connect to a single platform and then have access to many different brands. So at the end of the day, we believe we make it, faster, more affordable, and more efficient. And then, of course, just like the work that we're doing with Conexxus, is we're providing access to all these partnerships through APIs. And then also we can provide these services on low monthly payments instead of large investments and upkeep costs to support the platform. And then it also, provides integrations with legacy payments infrastructure and the ability to scale quickly with a cloud-based platform. So we'll jump into some of the macro trends. So as everybody knows, we recently had the NACS SOI Summit meetings, and some of the highlights coming out of the NACS SOI State of the Industry Summit was inflation and pent-up demand drove increased sales for everyone. So what we saw was, we had, strong negative underlying currents, though, in addition to increased sales. So around pressures on gallons, transactions, cost, and availability of labor. Also, what we found was the morning day part. So think of that as, the morning session, but between early drivers and noon, that food service has not returned since COVID. Secondly, looking at the margins for the business, major concerns about the availability of cost of labor. And so, that's what we need to produce more, gross margin per gallon on labor and dollars spent. Retailers with higher efficiencies, adapting pricing capabilities, and solid labor pool will benefit the most going forward. Thirdly, factors other than price at the pump are now driving traffic. So retailers are competing for volume with enhanced store environments, design, inside offerings, so more food service, private label, CBD, gaming are some of the examples. Also, other factors, mobile platforms with offers and reward programs enable more control of margins than price at the pump. Fourthly is, retailers need to become destinations today by differentiating their offers from everyone else. So food, services, charging stations, multiple fuels, et cetera. So as an example, Altria sees as a smokeless future by 2030, where GM sees no internal combustion engines by 2035. So we need to improve the value added offerings inside the store, and so we don't get disintermediated from the shoppers. And mobile is how people search and decide where they buy. So we'll talk a little bit about start with where inflation hit, and then we'll talk about how mobile transforms those experiences. So we thought this was really interesting, again, coming out of the State of the Industry Summit, where we're seeing that our industry has been hit especially hard, looking at the inflation across the different categories. So as everybody that's recently purchased a new vehicle, we see that the cost of vehicles is up 40.5%. Fuel, all types, is up about 40%. Utility and gas, pipe gas is up in cost 23.9. New vehicles up about 12.2. Electricity up 10.7. But I'll highlight really the categories in green, which are really the convenience retail categories. So tobacco and smoking products is up 7%, food away from home 6.4, and alcoholic beverages 2.7. But what's really interesting is if we look since 2019, most of these category percentages have more than doubled. So if we look at tobacco, since 2019, we've seen 14.6% inflation, while 7% of that was just in the last 12 months. The same with food, 13.2, beverages up 7.3, and then of course center store up about 8.4 from an inflation perspective. It's also, inflation has wiped out 10 years of wage gain. So if we go all the way back to 2013, and we look at the consumer price index versus hourly wages, we'll see that, we saw hourly wages really uptick in early 2020. And now what we've seen is, on a comparative basis, CPI has increased. So we've actually lost wage gains with all this increased inflation, even though we've seen, big gains in wages. Gasoline costs, we mentioned 43.6% more than just 1 year ago when we do a comparison looking across 2020, 2021, and 22. Today, our nationwide average for regular gas fuel is $4.09 a gallon. Consumer confidence also continues to fall. So if you look, we're at, almost approaching the lowest levels in 25 years. You'll remember we had 2008 when we had the recession. We are almost at that same level of low consumer confidence now looking back. Also, a barometer that we look at is weekly occupancy report from access control system provider Castle that says 43.1% of the workforce is back to work. And gasoline consumption is still off 5.8% from 2019 as we look across the last 3 years and then up to date. We're still off 5.8%. But what's really interesting is vehicle miles traveled actually grew in 2021. So if you look at it on a compared basis to 2019, vehicle miles traveled was clearly much lower than 2020, but we're actually seeing the increase in miles traveled, even though only 43% of the workforce has returned to the office. But return to the office, but not back to not return to normal, but not back to the office. So again, as we look at the data, 43.1% back to the office, but people are getting out. 93.8% have returned to national basketball games. 87.5% in comparison to 2019 of TSA check-in at the airports. 86.8% comparative to 2019 for open table diners. And even believe that movie box offices it's 80.8% of 2019. So then we'll talk a little bit about mobile KPIs and benchmarks. When we look at comparison of mobile versus all transactions in convenience retailing and fuels marketing. So what we've done here, because we do have a very large share of convenience retail now on mobile platform, we look at the NACS average data for transactions growth. So you'll notice that transaction growth has been fairly flat overall, but if we look at since January of 2020, just looking across indexed and anonymized data on our platform, we've seen a 6.8% growth in transactions. So consumers are speaking about the importance of their interest in using mobile devices to transact, to find locations and transact at these locations. Also, when we look at the monthly mobile transactions per users, when we compare this to the card network data, which is average 1.6 to 1.8 transactions per month of consumers returning to the same fuel brand, once we convert those same consumers to mobile applications using their mobile device to find and purchase, we're seeing average trip counts between 2.9 and 3 times per month to the same brand. So almost double. So these will be your most loyal customers once you get them converted over to your mobile app. Also, when we look at the gallons purchased per fuel transaction on mobile, we did an overlay between the NACS report, which is an average of 8.5 gallons per fuel transaction in 2021. We then overlaid that with mobile transactions, and we're running almost 12 gallons versus the 8.5 gallon transactions. And then as we see gas prices rise, it's part of inflation and the price of crude oil, gallons are beginning to shift away from premium gallons. So the impacts of the price, the cost of the fuel is actually driving consumers to downgrade to regular fuel versus premium fuel when we see that when we have lower overall fuel prices. And then also we look at when you're applying your discounting strategies or multiple discounting strategies, we looked at the top performers, and we see that 69.5% of fuel sold on the platform, again, this is indexed and anonymized, was discounted fuel. So the share of mobile transactions sold with a discount, the average cents per gallon discount for the top 10 customers is leveraged here on the scatter chart. So 2021 NACS report that top 10% of retailers saw fuel margins of 40.36 cents per gallon, which is 26.9% higher than the bottom 10% of retailers. Even though top performers price fuel 8 cents per gallon higher, this suggests that the top performers are better able to target discounts integrated with the payments. So again, associating the discount with a payment method, you can also manage, time of day, day of week that will have the biggest impact because we now have visibility and control of the analytics of this data. So now moving over to in-basket on mobile, where the NACS average basket was for 2021 was $7.59. And by the way, that those transactions lost 31 cents. After we look at our actually operating cost, relative to the price of that particular sale. But when we then compare that to a mobile transaction, we're running almost average of $12.50. So what this really means is we understand the impact of providing coupons or digital offers, as we call them in the mobile space, to drive more C-store conversion, but also to drive larger basket. So anytime that you can associate a digital offer with that transaction, it drives larger basket size. And then also we've noticed that users are growing faster than gallons consumed. So what's this mean? It means we're driving more inside growth with those same consumers. So what's interesting is we go all the way back to January of 2020. Pre-COVID, pre the pandemic, the user growth on the platform, and again, this is all indexed and anonymized data, was about equal to the gallons growth. That means that the consumers were mostly using the apps to purchase fuel. But then as you'll notice, as we went into second quarter of 2020, as the pandemic hit, and we've continued to see the same in-store growth. So again, this is a direct reflection of the conversion from forecourt to move traffic inside the C-store. And then if we look at inside items, which are about 10.3% of all mobile sales on the platform, what that really means, since it's 10.3% of total dollars spent, it actually converts to about almost 35% of transactions on the platform are in-store. Again, because we're looking at the average basket size of about $12 for in-store, versus the average sale for fuel, which is about 3 times that. So even though it's 10.3% of all traffic on the platform or dollars spent, it represents about 35% of in-store traffic, which I think is about 5% higher than the average conversion rate on consumers from forecourt to C-store. And then also, as I've mentioned, the morning day part. So this is the early part of the day is actually growing on mobile. So if you look at from 2019 at 31% to 2022, the first part of this year, we're now up to about 34.6%. But that's important because if we go back to the state of the industry, it was just reported that morning day part has not even returned yet to the pre-pandemic performance. So again, mobile is driving more in-store morning day part business. Mobile transaction growth by method of payment. Again, we're seeing the fastest growth on the tech wallets, so like Apple Pay and Google Pay wallets within the apps, followed by card on file, followed by ACH, which is a direct debit offering, and then lastly, for the private label credit cards. But you'll notice that all of these categories, when we look on an index basis, have all seen substantial growth, even though we know that overall sales has been generally flat, or actually 5.8% pre-pandemic. Okay, so we'll talk now just briefly about opportunities for mobile. Mobile is driving retail innovation across our industry. So when you start thinking about mobile payments, it's really about more than just replacing card swipes, but actually allowing consumers with their smartphone or their connected car to make payments for fuel or for EV charging or for merchandise. So order ahead, curbside delivery, things like that. We're also seeing mobile payments move now to voice-activated payments through virtual assistants. So you've probably heard about Amazon voice-enabled payments, leveraging your Amazon Prime account, so you can actually transact for fueling transactions at the gas station. So find gas, navigate to the fuel station, and then actually purchase all using voice commands. And then, of course, payments with super apps is becoming popular. So the Venmo, the PayPals, the Google Pays that have all launched super apps are now also being accepted at these fuel retail brands and convenience stores. Secondly is digital storefronts. So as you start thinking about mobile, it's really about replacing POS systems. Now, I don't mean physical systems, because you're going to always have a point of sale, but from a consumer perspective, mobile is now enabling consumers to order ahead and pull up for curbside pickup, or to provide those consumers with user-friendly, hyper-personalized, customized digital experiences. It's also enabling connected car transactions and marketing. So digital storefront now being delivered over across the mobile device or connected car. This leads us thirdly to digital marketing, which is replacing signs with targeted omni-channel marketing campaigns, whether that's inbound within the app or it's out of band, which is through email or text messaging. So it gives you the ability to target your audiences. Also, it allows you to push notifications, digital offers aimed at influencing during the purchase journey. So this way allows us to inspire the consumer to make different purchase decisions during the journey instead of just when they're standing in front of a point of sale system. And then, of course, that's all followed by the analytics platform that provides key marketing insights about consumer preferences. And then lastly, we want to talk a little bit about energy transition. So this is the convenience retail and fuels marketing industry thinking about replacing fuel-focused experiences with EV charging and hydrogen fueling experiences through the mobile apps and the connected cars, and leveraging technology-driven, customer-focused experiences and convenience in the palm of the consumer's hand. And we'll talk a little bit more about electrification and transportation shortly. So where and when do shoppers decide to buy? So 43% before they left home, 38% on the way to the convenience retail or fuel site, and 19% at the store. So we also know that 19% of convenience shoppers use digital search for store, product, and or service selection. And we know that 79% of digital devices were used were mobile phones. So digital will continue to extend into the retail runway. So this is just a quick look at how do we use mobile identity, payments, and consumer engagement to take the friction out of our daily journeys. So it starts with one-time registration, leveraging even the mobile phone number as the key metric to register the consumer. We immediately move to multi-channel messaging, digital marketing to move that consumer through the registration funnel. Then we want to provide them with a station locator and geolocation services so they can find and navigate, or they can see offers and amenities that are available at those locations. And then, of course, with all payments, we take fraud very serious. So we want to make sure that we're enabling fraud detection services on the platform, and then also fully tokenize all those payments as well. So we don't have any primary account numbers within the platform. Of course, mobile payment at the pump, number one use case around fueling operations. Now, with the advent of the pandemic, we see a big push with mobile order ahead. So allowing consumers to just order and skip the line. And then also you can offer curbside delivery. Of course, we still want to support in-store payments. So consumers can, in fact, go in and redeem deals and promotions, rewards. Also, new category that we're focusing on is EV charging, providing loyalty and rewards and targeted offers, not only for your EV drivers, because we're generally creating destination locations where consumers can shop, but also as we start moving into fleet platforms, as we know that there will be a big movement of electrification for transportation across the fleets, now incorporating in loyalty and rewards directly for those drivers to incentivize where that they go for their recharge at supercharging equipment. B2B platforms, as we know that last mile delivery, mid-mile delivery are the largest growing or the fastest growing markets for fuel consumption today. So you want to make sure that your mobile platform incorporates B2B capabilities to support those fleet drivers. And then also we're starting to see new categories with billing, subscription, payments, and roaming services, leveraging those same mobile applications. Whether that subscription is for a coffee club program or subscription for EV charging, there's actually many new ways to deliver and modernize the way that you bring products to service now, or products to market now. And then lastly, keep an eye on drive-through fast lanes. This is leveraging things like tool tag technology to identify consumers' arrival at the site, and then also to further influence them during the purchase journey. So quickly on electrification of transportation, we just wanted to touch on the current situation and some of the challenges. So we all know that the auto manufacturers are developing connected car experiences, but generally they lack integration with EV infrastructure and payments. So it's still a very clunky experience for consumers. Consumers also need e-roaming and universal payment acceptance so they can recharge at any charge point operator. Today, these platforms are very much standalone. So you have to have sometimes 4 and 5 different applications on your phone in order to be able to pull up and universally charge. So you have to have the application for the specific charging equipment. And then utilities are working with industry to develop infrastructure and programs which will accelerate the adoption of transportation electrification. So now what are the challenges? Challenges with low EV charging utilization and low return on investment is caused by this interoperability and friction with consumer onboarding. So we've got to solve for that. Also, we have to solve for lack of consumer confidence. Due to the payment friction and the reliability of the electrification of transportation infrastructure, the EV charging equipment, consumers don't have the confidence as when they used to leave home that they knew they could get fuel anywhere along the journey. So we have to provide a reliable infrastructure. And then, of course, monetization of digital services has been challenging due to the lack of the scale, the usage, and the pricing transparency across these EV charging networks. So these are things we have to solve for as an industry. However, energy transition is real and it's going to be important. So demand for electricity is growing 7 times faster than any other fuel. So as we look forward, from 2016 to 2050, we'll notice that in transport category, 27%, means huge increase in demand for electricity as we look out into the future, where not so much for industry or buildings, but very much so for transport. Also, we want to have awareness. The U.S. government recently, through the infrastructure bill, has now applied $7.5 billion to electrification of transportation, specifically to level 3 fast charging equipment. And they've also pushed that responsibility down to the states. So you're noticing there's a number of electrification coalitions that are beginning to form. We have the work that NACS is doing in support with Sigma and the Fuels Institute and the Alliance for Transportation of Electrification. We also have the Highway 23 Coalition. We have the REV Group, which is the Regional Electric Vehicle Midwest Coalition. So this Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin are working together. And then, of course, the Electric Highway Coalition, which is being formed by the major utilities to try to solve for some of these challenges. So very quickly, as we think about connected cars now, we think about connecting sites with a services ecosystem. So by enabling universal tokens across the connected car experience, the consumer is now able to charge, EV charging or fleet fueling or parking, hydrogen fuel, food ordering, car maintenance and car washes, and then also receive the benefits of loyalty and rewards and digital offers, all through leveraging our Conexxus integrations into the site systems. So we leverage Conexxus to connect into the points of sale and the fuel controllers and the car wash. And then, of course, providing these experiences across the merchant accounts and acquiring infrastructure that's already in place. So subscriptions is also something that we can enable across mobile platforms. So it's powering retail digitization. So easy onboarding of fleets or business to consumer experiences, select and bundle services. So these are new offerings for convenience, retail and fuels marketing, and then subscription management. A number of categories of the way to sell subscriptions, but we are very much a subscription-based society. I mean, just look at all the streaming subscriptions that we support today for entertainment. And then also, pay attention to the new super apps I touched on. So applications like the new Google Pay super app, where you can shop across many different brands. You want to make sure that your retail sites are enabled for these particular super apps. Okay, well, that really kind of concludes, the highlights of today that we wanted to cover off. So we'll leave it now for you to ask questions in the chat session, and then we'll look forward to having our Q&A session. So thank you for your time today, and look forward to the Q&A.
All right. There you are, Don. Webcam's working now. Great. So Don, thank you for all that information. That was a lot to take in, and I know our viewers at home are probably like, wow, what a lot of stats and stuff. Some very good information. A couple of things. So you talked about the dip in consumer confidence, and I'm sure there's a lot of reasons behind that. Can we explore that a little bit more and talk about the driving factors behind that?
Yeah, great question, and thanks for the all the attendees on the webinar as well. So as we think about consumer confidence, and I'd mentioned that this is at an all-time low, or almost reaching a new all-time low since 2008, when we had the last recession, we had the bank failures. But really, as we look at consumer confidence index, it's really an inverse related to inflation and unemployment. So when inflation or underemployment goes up, the consumer confidence index goes down and vice versa. So, we're at inflationary times where unemployment was low for a long period of time. So consumer confidence has been, quite frankly, very high until recent. So as we start looking forward now at 2020, 2021, we had really the perfect storm created. Okay, that was for inflation, I mean. So we had massive stimulus checks plus significant pent-up demand for supply chain disruption. And then consumers were not spending on travel, dining, or entertainment because of COVID. And then we had red hot labor markets that led to wage growth. And so, if we start looking at this perfect storm and, what is driving the inflation. But what's really interesting is 2 out of 3 households say that their budgets can't sustain further price increases. So, just a couple of comments on as we further unpack this. COVID's not over, right? As much as it's kind of gone away, it's much more manageable problem. We're not back to pre-pandemic normal, and we don't think we'll be there for a while. Gas and food price inflation causes consumers to eat more at home, which means we're going to be less driving. They're going to substitute less expensive products or substitutes, without, they're not going to go without, so they're going to look for lower cost substitutes. And they're going to shop with retailers that have perceived lower cost prices, whether that's, the Walmarts, Targets, Costco's of the world, and even dollar stores. So as we think about from a convenience industry, we do compete heads up with the dollar stores. So we need to be thinking about, how are we going to address this as an industry and put offers out there to attract consumers back. So I think that's really, kind of the background of why consumer confidence. But I mean, we could look at a lot of other attributes of lower consumer confidence that are going to be impacting our industry as well.
Okay, great. So one of the questions that came in, Don, is what percentage of total transactions are mobile for retailers that offer mobile? Do you have any idea on that one?
Yeah, great question. So as we look across our industry, we look at about 53% of convenience retail sites for the U.S. and Canada on our platform. We're seeing, between, say 1 or 1.5 and 2% of total transaction volume are actually going mobile. Now, which is relatively low, and I think everybody's trying to figure out how do we get more consumers converted over to these mobile platforms, because as we've talked about all the benefits, larger basket size because we have the ability to market to those consumers, more gallons per fill up. They're kind of, mobile customers are the perfect customer. They're like the old loyal customers that were using the branded oil cards, right? That was at 4 to 5% of the market that always came back to your brand at a much more frequent period. So having said that, if we look at Starbucks as an example, what we understand from the data, about 37% of all their transactions are done on a mobile device. So the gap that we're trying to close with mobile is, how do we get this 1.5 to 2% of transactions up to, even an aspirational 37%, but if we can just get to 20%, it becomes very meaningful.
Okay, kind of a follow-up question to that. Is there a way for, or I guess best practices for retailers to think about making like mobile app behavior sticky as opposed to contactless, right? Because contactless is really being pushed by a lot of the card brands. You know, there's advertising in the mainstream. So, I mean, obviously it's better for retailers to have them use the mobile app. How can you drive people to that?
Yeah, so let's quick just compare and contrast, tap and pay or contactless with your mobile device versus a mobile app. When we go contactless, we don't know the consumer, right? They tap their phone, it looks like another 16-digit bin range card coming through like a card dip. And then even worse is those are not even the last 4 digits of the bin range, because the tech wallets are actually passing through what we call a DPAN, a digital pan. So we really can't even compare if we matched up with our card dips where we did know the consumer with a loyalty account. So that's the downside. The benefit of getting them in the mobile app is you can now influence that consumer during the purchase journey. You can monitor their behavior. You can give them relevant offers to keep them coming back more frequently. So we've looked a lot of this as how do we get consumers onto the mobile apps, and it's not rocket science. It's simply just messaging out to consumers at the retail site that you have a mobile app and make it simple for the consumer. So a QR code, on the sign, and signage on the pump, signage in the windows, signage on the doors. It's just marketing 101 that we've done for 100 years in our industry, but make it easy with a QR code. They scan it, they download the app, and put incentives with it. You wouldn't believe how 10 or 15 cents per gallon for a limited time offer will inspire customers. And especially right now, when we're seeing fuel prices, I mean, I talked about the NACS data, that was last month's report. If I roll that forward to real time, we're up another 50 cents a gallon. So, while margins are still good for the industry, this is a great time to offer some discounts to consumers, 10, 15 cents, even for a limited period. Put signage everywhere, get them to download. We also know that if they use the mobile app 3 times, you got them hooked. Okay, they've got to use it 3 times though, until it becomes just muscle memory. They're going to reach for their phone every time.
Okay, that's interesting that it takes 3 times. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, well, think about your experience with Uber or Starbucks. The first time you're kind of figuring it out. The second time it got a little bit easier. By the time you did it a third time, you go, oh, this is simple. So yes, you got to get them past the learning curve.
Right. So we talked a little bit about mobile ordering, curbside delivery, all of that. There's a lot of challenges with that for retailers. So I guess first, do you have some best practices or some thoughts for retailers that are starting to get into it? And then how do they handle some of those challenges?
Yeah, so let's talk about the challenges first, and then how do we address them? So challenge number 1. If you want to partner with a Grubhub or a DoorDash, they simply give you another tablet device so you can receive the order into your store, which means somebody has to be attending to that tablet device. It's a totally standalone, separate system, and they can now take the order. They're going to log it into the point of sale manually. They're going to pull the order or prepare the food or enter into the food management system. So number 1, we have to get past that. Number 2, we have to solve for, are they charging the right taxes? Because the retailer is going to be responsible. And if they don't have the right zip code and they don't have the right product codes, then we don't know that they're working off of the tax table that's been established within that point of sale. So that's the other, it's a minor issue, I guess, on the onset, but it could become a bigger issue if tax audits get started, across our industry around this food service and delivery. Then the third problem that we have is, that's just another party involved. Now, they do bring a large install base with them. However, they erode, sometimes 28 to 34% of the margin on the sale, which means they are 28, 34% of the sale, which means they probably eroded most all the margin on the sale. So those are the issues we have to solve for. Now, those are very, very important partners, though. So it's not that we don't want DoorDash or Grubhub, but we need them to provide the value add, which is delivering that food service. So if we can provide platforms for them to connect into, so it runs through our proper point of sale system, through our kitchen management. And that's the work that the Conexxus working group is. So it's so important that, the participants on this call, get involved, get your companies involved as we drive forward, establishing these standards, because that's the magic to pull all the parties together and get past the integration challenges. So I think it's really industry standards are going to solve for it. We got to run on the same payment rails. We need to run through the same existing site systems, so we don't have extra tablet devices and training that has to go on to support this. And then you're only paying margin on the delivery. You're not paying margin on the order itself.
Yeah, and I think another thing that retailers need to think about is if you partner with a DoorDash or, that kind of a service, now it's DoorDash's customer. They're not your customer, so you tend to lose some of that visibility into your customer behavior.
That's right. Yeah, if they're ordering through that app, through that provider's app, it's absolutely their customer. But as we think about building our brands and building our apps, you can now route them over to your app and then get them into your app experience, and then you really own the customer at that point. So key point that you mentioned there is making sure that you stay in control of the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question that came in about 8112s, and 8112s, for those of you in the audience that don't know what those are the new digital offers. So essentially they're electronic coupons rather than the paper coupons. And those have quite a bit of interest in our industry because that allows people, the consumer packaged good companies, to market directly to consumers, and then those consumers have choice of where they want to use that coupon. So they're not necessarily tied to a particular grocery store. They can use that through the app. Tell me a little bit about, I guess, your thoughts on 8112s and how that's going to shape going forward.
Yeah. So if we again go back to what was the problem, the problem was we were trying to move away from in-cap marketing in convenience stores, not knowing who the customer, did we influence them or not. So the consumer packaged goods companies need data so they can roll out the right marketing programs to grow basket size, to attract new clients to their products, to get consumers to try sister products to the primary that they normally buy. Those are all the drivers behind this. Now, the beauty of the standard, as you mentioned, it allows us to then integrate in with price books within the point of sale system. So this, the industry standards just keeps piling on top, as we get more and more of these pieces defined. And so it number one, allows the consumer packaged good to get more information so they are willing to fund these projects. It allows marketers to grow bigger basket size. It allows for integration in with point of sale. And lastly, so the mobile app is going to provide the digital offer. So this is how we influence the customer during the purchase journey. But then we take all the friction out of the actually using the offer. So by simply showing the Conexxus QR code at checkout, that offer now is associated with that order. They bought that product. We can apply the discount leveraging the Conexxus interface, through the loyalty-based interface down to the point of sale.
Okay. I guess a couple other questions. Well, actually, there's a couple questions that have come in. Somebody asked if the slides are going to be made available, and yes, those will be on the Conexxus365 platform. The recording to listen to this later will be available later in the week, or I guess today's Thursday, maybe early next week, and the slides, the presentation deck will also be there. So you talked a little bit about EV charging, and I guess a couple of points here. There's a couple of questions, and then I had some comments as well. So there's a number of organizations that seem to be tackling EV charging and standards around that. You had a slide with several. One of the things that I've noticed is there is a keen interest from the card brands to control some of those EV charging, right? So they're very interested in tying those to traditional credit products, even debit products. But in the convenience space, we've had a lot of success with ACH. And I think it's important that the retailers out there just make sure that their voice is heard, that we want to have an option for other payment methods besides just credit and debit products. And I know that Conexxus is working with some of the organizations that you had mentioned, including the Secure Technology Alliance. There's also another one called Open Charge Point Protocol that I think Europe is working with. Are you familiar with that organization and I guess some of the other standards in this space?
Yes. So the Open Charge Alliance. So we can either connect into electrification or EV charging equipment. We call those charge point operators, either from cloud to cloud, which is using what we call OCPI, or we connect directly into the equipment, the charge equipment, using industry standard OCPP. So very similar to what we did with Conexxus to connect into site systems, fueling site systems, point of sale through the mobile working group. We can also leverage those existing standards as we're going forward with electrification of transportation. Now, as far as payments, yes, the card networks again are back to the network tokens. So that solves, I guess, for MasterCard and Visa and American Express Discover. But to your point, we know that the biggest uptake in electrification of transportation, at least initially, is going to be fleet. So what we've developed is a universal token that can be supported across all payment types, whether it's fleet, whether it's ACH, whether it's traditional cards, to solve for that bigger problem. So yeah, universal token, so the consumer can load any payment method they want, and then they can transact across any roaming partnership on EV charging equipment, mostly on level 3 fast chargers.
Okay, and I guess I'll just do another shameless plug for Conexxus. So we are looking at some of these standards, what's currently out there, what we need to do to make things relevant for our industry. So stay tuned on that. And if you're a retailer or a supplier interested, stay tuned, because we will have a new work item on that soon. And one of the things we do at Conexxus is not necessarily reinvent the wheel. So we can leverage what some of these other organizations have done to help our industry. So lots of exciting work there. I have a question about the super apps. So you referenced like Google Pay and the ability for it to find like the stores in your area that are participating. How does a retailer actually get listed in that? Is that something they have to sign up for? And is that different if you are branded, like a major oil versus an independent guy? How does all that work?
Yeah, so I think it works really the same, whether you're oil or you're, a branded market or around the convenience store brand. You do have to have an agreement, with those different super app providers. Now, Google Pay is a little bit different because it runs, again, network tokens. It's more of a traditional. If you go with a super app like PayPal or Venmo, then we actually process through their network. So the configuration could be slightly different. The beauty of the work that we did with Conexxus Mobile Working Group is the way that we set up with the MPPA. We publish APIs out to those different to app providers, to the super app providers, so they then have access to all the different sites connected to the MPPA. So we've made it much easier for super app providers, but we've also tried to make it easier for the oil brands, because we're leveraging industry standards all the way from network tokens to the way that we use universal tokens for fleet or ACH or all the different payment methods.
Okay. I guess one final question. We have just a few minutes left here. You had a very interesting stat that 19% of folks actually use digital search to find locations. And Lori Stillman has this wonderful video, I'm not sure if you've seen it, where she stands in front of an ATM at a convenience store and says, where's the nearest ATM? And it goes to, Bank of America. And where's the nearest place I can buy a beer? And of course it takes you to, a liquor store. And where can I do whatever? And it takes you all these different places. And the only thing it finds is say, where can I buy gas? And literally she's standing in front of all of these items. So that's one thing that I think our industry, NACS is working on some ways to make that better. But I think for the retailers out there, it is very important that you make sure that you are located on search, just because of the fact that when consumers are searching for something, unless you are identified as providing that service, you won't be found.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We also, part of the Conexxus mobile working group, have this integration or concept around station locator, to allow consumers to find, to navigate. So absolutely, it's got to be part of your overall strategy as you're rolling out mobile apps or supporting super apps or just consumers in general.
Right. Okay, well, Don, it has been great to have you here today. I think all of our folks learned a lot of very interesting information. The deck will be made available, and thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thanks everybody for participating today. Thanks, Linda, for hosting us. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out anytime. Bye for now.
All right, thank you, Don. Bye.